Samope, Sampadia, Chimafidi non cotu, era one radio. Samope, Jumpadia, Chimafidi non cotu, era one radio. Oh, and Yumpamchima, Asam Pamchima.
Hello, beautiful people of Ghana. This is Ghanaians Specialist Hospital. We are so excited to announce to our people Ghana that we are finally opened and we are accepting patients. At Ghanaians Specialist Hospital, our extraordinary physicians and nurses are here to provide a high-quality medical service to our extraordinary patients. Our services include primary care services, maternal, neonatal, and pediatric services. We also have an in-house pharmacy. We have X-ray and laboratory services available to you. Come to us for all your healthcare needs, and you will be happy you did, because we believe the health is wealth. Thank you, and stay blessed.
All right. Good evening, Era One Radio listeners. We are broadcasting live YouTube and Modern Ghana Radio, as well as Facebook. I just got a glitch. I don't know what is happening about Facebook tonight. God help us. Right. Tonight, we are continuing with our Divine Connection show. As usual, you know, when we meet on Divine Connection show, it's about bringing divinity into humanity. That is where divinity intercepts our human life. We bring the God factor into our system. And tonight, I'm blessed to have our co-host, Mr. Max Vardon, all the way from the Ghana studio. And so it's a privilege having him again to expand and share his knowledge with us. Uncle Max, we are welcome on Divine Connection as usual.
Thank you very much, Dr. Boison. I trust you're well.
I am, definitely. How are you doing? You doing good yourself?
Amen.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. So if you want to call into the station, it's
managing by His grace.
Oh, okay. I think there was a little bit of a lag somewhere there. I hope our system doesn't matter. I think I'm having some problem with Facebook. I don't know what is going on. At least as if it couldn't connect to Facebook. Maybe I don't know whether Dr. Setitu will help us, but I don't think it's going through tonight. All right. Anyway, well, number to call in is 2402-802-633, and to text in is 510-9310946. As I said earlier, when we are broadcasting live on Facebook and YouTube, also on Modern Ghana Radio. All right, tonight we are going to look at another interesting topic, and as you know, we pick a verse from the Bible, we expand it, and then the experts, give us their full attention and their full. Tonight we are looking at the state of the church, trending updates, the state of the church, whatever is going on in our system. Of course, our spiritual life is very important. We are three-parted being. We have a spirit in us, a soul, and both live in a body. So we have to take up our holistic lifestyle. So we are looking at the aspect of the church and any updates. Our verse today is going to come from the book of Matthew, chapter 16, verses 13 through 20. And before I do, I don't know whether Uncle Max has any opening remarks for us before we continue. Uncle Max,
Well, again,
any
what we will be dealing with tonight is something that, yes, I was just going to remind our listeners and viewers that what we will be dealing with tonight is, as usual, topical. It's to do with what is going on in the world right now, and in particular, Ejakrom, Ghana. So it's very germane, it's very pertinent and relevant to life as we are experiencing it at this time, even though the text comes from some 2,000 years ago. It is still relevant today.
Okay, all right. Thank you. It looks as if the Facebook might not be working for us very well tonight, but we'll see. All right, so with your permission, I'm going to read the book of Matthew chapter 16, verses 13 through 20, and then we'll jump on to our study. All right. So it says, when Jesus came into the coast of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, saying, whom do men say that I, the Son of Man, am? I don't know whether with this initial opening, he already gave up the answer of who he was. And they said, some say that thou art John the Baptist, some Elias, and others Jeremiah, or one of the prophets. 15 said, he said unto them, but whom say ye that I am? And Simon Peter answered and said, thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God. And Jesus answered and said unto him, blessed art thou, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood hath not revealed it unto thee, but my Father which is in heaven. And I say unto thee, thou art Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. And I will give unto thee the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatsoever thou shalt bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatsoever thou shalt loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. 20. Then charged he his disciples that they should tell no man that he was Jesus the Christ. Amen. All right, Uncle Max, as usual, we go with our syllabus. We normally want to look at the text and look at what the subject might be. What, in your opinion, is the subject of this verse that I just read?
Well, there are two things. In the first place, he introduces the question of his identity, which is bound with his purpose on earth. And so he tests his disciples to find out how acutely perceptive they are of his purpose on earth. And he does this by first asking them, what do men say he is? Just to get them on the wavelength of thinking about who he might be. So they regurgitate what they have heard before he asks them, okay, so now, what do you think? What do you say? What do you believe? And having then subsequently received an answer from Simon, now later known as Simon Peter, he then charges them to keep that information secret. Because again, it is bound with his purpose on earth. And therefore, if that information is revealed prematurely, it could alter the destiny of events that were to take place. So he charged them to keep that information and that understanding and knowledge secret. You know, when one speaks certain things, you have the possibility of altering the future by what you project out of you, by how you engage with the universe, as it were. And we know this because, one, we are made in the image of God, and two, when God created the universe, he created it through the word. Yeah. In the beginning, and this is repeated in the New Testament also, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. So our self-narrative and what we say to ourselves and what we say to the universe is extremely important, because it primes the universe with an expectation that we are hosting and harboring. And that can influence what is to happen. This, after all, is one of the reasons that we pray and we submit petitions to the Most High, because we are hoping that God will do something to help us to achieve our dreams and aspirations. Okay, so this is why he held them to silence.
Wow, that is just keeping the information between them, huh? Not to reveal it prematurely. All right. Well, so in this case, where we just let's look at the stakeholders. I know it's going to be a limited scope of stakeholders, but what might they be? What could be the stakeholders in this text?
Yeah, but essentially, this is a conversation between Jesus and his disciples. In the context of this conversation, other people are mentioned, but it's primarily between Jesus and his disciples, and in particular also Simon Peter, who was inspired with insight and intuition to reveal the identity of the Christ. And this was acknowledged by Jesus when he said, flesh and blood hath not revealed this unto thee, but my Father which is in heaven. So these are the two key actors or players in this particular scene. And Jesus then went on further to charge Peter with the task of being the bedrock upon which his church would be founded. The word Peter actually derives from a Greek word which means rock. And it is from that we get words like petrified, which is a process in which something is turned into a crystalline form, which we would refer to as a rock form. So Peter means the rock. Before he was elevated or charged with being that foundational rock, his name was Simon Bar-Jonah. Yeah.
All right. So with this question that Jesus asked the disciples, I think you already hinted the relevance of why, because I was still wondering why he would ask them whether he wanted to be sure the people, like you said, knew who he was. But when it comes to Peter providing the answer, was that a surprise to the rest of the disciples, or that was obvious to all of them about the identity of Christ?
I don't think it was obvious to all of them, because as Jesus said, his analysis or assessment was that Simon Peter had not come by that knowledge through normal means, but it was revealed to him. So there was a supernatural channel there, if you like, that fed that information to Simon Peter. But before I go on, Dr. Boison, I need to mention also that often we pick up information and knowledge and understanding by what is said. But sometimes we also need to pay attention to what is not said. What is not said. And in this case, Jesus asked two questions. And the answers that he got to the first question, were the names of people who had passed on. Okay, some say you are John the Baptist, and others that you are Elias or Jeremiah or one of the prophets. That's verse 14. Immediately afterwards, verse 15, he says unto them, but whom say ye that I am? Now, between 14 and 15, there's a very significant omission, which I would like to point out, which is that Jesus did not rebuke his disciples for suggesting that he might be a reincarnation of one of the prophets. And I think it's a very significant point. because it very much goes to what we understand of life and death and the hereafter and the here before, even. Okay, which is to do with life purposes and circumstances of birth and so on. So, with this exchange, he was implicitly endorsing the idea that people can be reincarnated and they can come back from the spirit realms into an incarnation on this planet for whatever reason. Okay, and therefore we need to get our minds around the idea that this may not be the only life that we are privileged to live. Although, having said that, once we are here, we are duty bound to live it to the best of our ability. And really, that means fulfilling the two commandments that Jesus left with us: love thy God with all thy heart and soul and mind and strength, and love thy neighbor as thyself. This is what it means to be a Christian. Okay. But this idea about eternal damnation and hellfire and so on, I'm not so sure. I think these are constructs that were developed by the early church, means of controlling people by instilling fear into people. And we have to understand that fear and love are polar opposites. Yeah, you cannot have love where fear exists. The two are incompatible. And if Jesus is the epitome of love, then in no way would we expect that a vehicle and institution that preaches the love of Christ would also engage in fear mongering. The two do not go together at all. And we need to bear this in mind when we consider the state of the church, not just in Ghana, but globally, worldwide, because it is the similar doctrines of fear that have been passed down through the generations to control people and to, as it were, frighten them into doing what they should be doing out of love rather than out of fear. That's extremely important. And many of our churches today have become places where there is fear mongering by virtue of the pastors and the priests preaching the message that there are people in families that are out to get the members of the congregation and to dispossess them of their rightful inheritance and progression and so on and so forth. And that unless there is some kind of contribution from those members of the congregation so that the pastor will pray for them and all the rest of it, then they will not progress and they will be subject to the influences of Satan. That is totally unchristian, totally wrong. And I have to make a mark stance against that. Now, this is one of the things that is going on in our churches today.
Wow, that is awesome. That is awesome. And I have a follow-up question with regards to, before we even come into our contemporary situation or questions. Here Peter makes this remark about who the Christ is, and Jesus follows up by saying, "You are Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church." Of course, you've mentioned already about Peter's the meaning of his Petra, Petros, rock, and all that. And also, so Peter here is being referred to as a rock. He gave the right response, that the expected response. But Jesus says something that based on the response that you gave, I am going to build my church based on these two. Yes. Now, my question is, was Jesus' response based on Peter as the rock, or the response that he knew Jesus was the Christ?
Well, the two are comparable in the sense that his response was clearly divinely inspired.
Okay.
Yeah. The Holy Ghost, if you like, or the Holy Spirit was attendant upon him. He had displayed this gift of discernment and understanding and insight and so on. So on that basis, Jesus said, you are the one who is attuned to my mission. Therefore, I will appoint you as the cornerstone of my mission after I am gone. You know, there's a saying that God is a frequency. Okay. And all we need to do is to tune into that frequency and turn on. So the frequency is manifest in certain qualities that we associate with love, patience and forbearance, kindness and compassion, and so on. These are all attributes and aspects of love. Okay, and these are the frequencies that God transmits on and presents himself on. So we need to do, if we want to get close to God, we tune into those frequencies and God will come pouring through our lives.
Wow.
It's as simple as that. Not that it's easy, but that's just the simplicity of it all.
Exactly. You make it sound very simple. And that, I mean, on that note of simplicity, let me ask this question about the gates of hell. I mean, not prevailing against it. In simplicity, what does that mean? Because Jesus said, when and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it.
Yes. Now, that's a very, very interesting statement. Because when you talk about gates, they serve two purposes. One is to keep people in, and the other is to keep things out.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, when he follows the gates of hell with will not prevail against it, then he's talking about the gates of hell being in the in a passive mode. Okay, because gates don't move; they don't move off their own accord. So, if you're saying the gates will not prevail, then you're talking about a force that is coming to the gate to break the gate down. So he's saying that the church will at some point break down the gates of hell and invade hell. In other words, his kingdom, yeah, and the reach of God will extend even to the things that we think of as hell and will eradicate hell completely. This is the mission of the church. This is what it was supposed to do. It was supposed to empower humans so that we can create a kingdom of God or heaven on this earth. That is the mission that the church was established to do, to empower people. You understand?
And is that being achieved?
Unfortunately, for the vast majority of humanity, no. Because we have become sidetracked, and that goes back many, many centuries. You see, I had to do a paper some time ago for an organization on whether Africa was prepared for the current dynamics of the world, okay, for the recolonization endeavors of China and Europe and America and even the Muslim world and so on. And when I started researching into where Africa is at, I discovered I really had to go back to Christian times to understand the origin of where we are in the world today. And before Christ Caesar, in fact, there were private money lenders who had their own currency. And Julius Caesar abolished these private currencies and decided to launch a Roman currency for representing the Roman Empire. And very few people are aware of this, but it was for this reason that he was assassinated, because he took away the power of the financiers who were making money out of the people. And that struggle between private finance and state power has been going on since Julius Caesar's time. And it is going on today. But it has become a life or death struggle for freedom in this world, because the financiers, the money lenders, and the people who control money in this world have now co-opted virtually all the institutions of state to their will and purpose. Okay, and they've subverted so many democracies. It's quite extraordinary. But this is where we are. And unfortunately, one of the institutions that they co-opted was the early church. And this is why in the 1500s, well, the 1400s, actually, about 1452, the then Pope issued a bull which authorized Spain and Portugal to go out into the world and subjugate non-Christian civilizations and steal their wealth and enslave them and so on. And that process continues today. Okay. And unfortunately, we have adopted these ideas in the church, whether it's in Europe or especially in Africa. And the finance element, mammon, has completely overshadowed the spiritual element. So for many, many people, Christianity has become a right of obligation. They have to go to church to pay their tithes or to be seen by the right people, to be pious and so on. And it's all completely superficial, as it was in the time when Jesus came and the Pharisees and Sadducees were strutting around pretending to be holy. And he called them out and said, "You guys are just hypocrites." Yes, well, today we have the same Sadducees and Pharisees, but we call them pastors and men of God and this and that. And they're all hypocrites, because they are not preaching the true gospel. They are preaching prosperity and they are spreading fear rather than faith and love. And this is where
we have a few that are genuine, so we just qualify with some. Or what do you think?
Oh, yeah. I'm not saying everybody. Okay. There are many well-meaning people, but the majority, unfortunately, don't seem to be. And, all you have to do is to go to any neighborhood where there's a church and observe the hours and observe the noise that they make. Yeah, you will hear the loudspeakers blasting noise outside of the church. Now, how is that respecting, never mind loving your neighbor, if you insist on disturbing them? You understand? And just that simple fact alone, it betrays the ungodliness of what goes on. And I've had to walk out of churches where the volume of the PA system was so high that it was painful to my ears. And these were churches where there were children. And, I'd ask an usher, don't you have any concern for the hearing of these young children?
The
No,
decibels,
it's nothing to do with them. They only work there. Yeah.
Wow.
That's completely unchristian. How do you love your neighbor by making them deaf?
I'm sure they want everybody to hear everything that is going on. The louder the volume, the better it sounds.
I've always been struck by the passages in the Bible where the still small voice of God speaks to someone. It's a still small voice. God has never shouted at anybody, to the best of my knowledge. He's never shouted.
My wife was telling me that God is going to speak to me tonight, and I think you are doing it. You are just saying exactly that. God doesn't shout; He uses a still small voice. So I think that's a confirmation. That's a confirmation. Well, you are listening to Era One Radio. We are broadcasting live on YouTube, Facebook, and Modern Ghana Radio. Looks as if there's a glitch with our Facebook today, so I don't know whether it's going through. But anyway, still have Uncle Max on the other side of the studio, and his actually, dishing it out for me on the exegesis on Matthew 16 from 13 to 17. Before we continue, let's take this little jingle, and then when we come back, we'll go into contemporary issues that are trending. Stay tuned.
Timothy non kotu Era One Radio Timothy non kotu Era One Radio and Pamchima Asam Pamchima Era One
The message said it absolutely right. We are broadcasting live on Facebook, YouTube, and Modern Ghana Radio on Era One Radio. And this is the Divine Connection Show. I'm your host, Charles Boison, and my co-host / guest all the way from the continent, Uncle Max Vardon. Before the break, he was telling us some of the habit that's going on in the church, and sometimes the music, the loudness of it, that can even get somebody deaf, and we have to look at all those, if we say we love our neighbor. All right, so Uncle Max, let me go on to this question that is bothering me. And so currently, the gates of hell are not prevailing against the church, we can say. But then certain teachings or operations leave one
prevailing against
they
the
are
church.
They are okay.
They're not making.
Well, okay. Let's see. Some we'll say some are prevailing against the church, and then certain teachings or operations leave one wondering, especially the infiltration of the love. I mean, not just money, the love for money. Are we allowing unrighteous desire for money to blind the church? Because it looks as if, of course, money is good. I mean, we need money to establish. I mean, money was used to build some of the missionary schools. It is good. But sometimes it looks as if in modern days, it's becoming too much and it's been on the excess. Are we allowing the love of it to blind the church?
Well, absolutely. Like I said, there has been a struggle between those who love money and the state. At one point, the states were very aligned with the various religions. They at least observed the primacy of God. We've now moved into a situation where God is being questioned even as to whether he exists or not in certain states. So certainly the dichotomy, the struggle between God and mammon, between spirit and material wealth and money, seems now to have swung very firmly in favor of money. And it is one of these things that, as Jesus put it once, you can only serve one or two masters. You can't serve both. Certainly, each will have its place, but your loyalty has to be very clear as to who you aspire to serve. Yeah, and he did say, render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's, and unto God that which is God's. Now, we've gotten to a situation where pastors are taking what is Caesar's in the name of God. God doesn't eat CDs. Doesn't even eat plantain chips. You know, what he eats, what delights God is the service that we do unto others in his name.
In his name, okay.
That is what he eats. That is why he gave us the command, others as you have them do unto you. Love thy neighbor as thyself. That is what he eats. So the idea that you can gain admission into heaven by paying somebody on earth who claims to be God's representative is complete lunacy. It is ludicrous. And it's a waste of people's efforts and their mental space and their emotional commitments and so on. Because it then becomes, how do I get the money to pay my man of God? As opposed to, what can I do to be of service to my fellow man? And unfortunately, the men of God and women of God, I don't see them giving any service to their fellow man. We've all people who have given to the church for many, many years, and the church has used the money to buy a fee-paying school. And when the congregant comes along and says, you know, Pastor, my son needs his kindergarten and he needs a place in the school. Can you find a place for him? They say, no. Unless you are paying for work or whatever it is, you don't get in. You know, or somebody falls on hard times and goes to the church welfare committee to say, can you tide me over with a small loan to meet the school fees or medical bills or whatever it is? And they say, no. This one is a test that God has sent you to test your faith. So struggle with it as best you can. I don't see what is Christian about that.
But Uncle Matt, the argument.
When you have a situation where the pastor.
Yeah, I was going to say there's this argument or other.
Family. Yes, go on. Okay.
Yeah, I was going to say there's this school of thought where, okay, some of the pastors will say, okay, if we give out money or help to every member of the church, then the church is going to be broke. So I heard one man of God say that, okay, church money is not used to take care of church members. I mean, one of the pastors in Kumasi, that we don't use church offering or church money to help church members. There are various schools of thoughts, and others who have said that, okay, hey, if people are giving to the church and some member is in need, they can be helped. So how do we prevent a plethora of church members lining up, going for help, versus the church being discreet about how we can effectively help without stepping on toes, without being wicked, and at the same time too, without being, emptying the coffers? Where do you find a balance?
You know, I learned of a church locally, which belongs to, has a headquarters church, a mother church. And this small local church was tasked with paying 100,000 CDs every quarter to the mother church. One way or another, they had to find the money. And there's no accounting for that money. So we don't know what happens to it. Certainly one doesn't see the social works that might be done with that kind of money to get the kaya off the streets, to build shelters for abused women, and so on and so forth. We don't see that happening. And if it were to happen, I'm sure it will be in the newspapers that, you know, this pastor, that church, and so on, has been doing good for their community. I don't read those things. So I can only assume it doesn't happen. But if we go back to the Old Testament, and inquire after the tithes that the children of Israel were supposed to pay, we find that there are three things. One, it was only the priests of the tribe of Levi who were supposed to collect those tithes. So today, if you are not from the tribe of Levi, you do not have any right to go to anybody and demand that they pay you tithes. Two, that money was used as the central, how shall I put it, reserve. And it was not just money, but mostly in kind, from the harvest. And so they stored grain and they stored foodstuffs and so on to help the nation over in times of famine. So what was given by the people went back to the people, except for the little bit that the priests of the tribe of Israel lived on, because they didn't work other than what the temple duties that they discharged. So what the people gave was exactly what went back to the people. The priests merely were custodians of this wealth. They held it in trust for the people. Now show me one church today that says it is holding the money it collects in trust for its congregation. I don't see that happening. So straight away, we are strayed from the Old Testament regime, which collected these surpluses for times of lean and disaster. Now we come to the New Testament, where the disciples were enjoined to accept only hospitality, food and shelter, and maybe clothing from the places where they went to spread the gospel. They were not specifically told not to ask for money, because they were supposed to be evangelizing alongside whatever trade and job they had. You understand?
I do.
They were not full-time evangelists. If they were, then they were to rely on the generosity of the people that they went to. They had no right to God for money. But that's precisely what we see today, where the word of God has become commercialized. And I don't see God in any of this. I see Satan in all of this.
Wow, that is strong. That is strong. That is strong. I have a follow-up question.
Strong,
I mean,
but
I had a question that was going to come after the question I intended to ask, but since you hit on that, I think I'm going to go ahead and ask that before we continue. So, Paul, who wrote 2/3 of the Bible, did not hammer too much on tithing, but offered a model of giving purposefully and cheerfully. I mean, to do that. Would you say Paul was oblivious of the Old Testament's teaching, or he assumed it was already in place and should be followed as such? What I'm saying is, Paul came and his teachings. I mean, this guy wrote about 2/3 of the New Testament. And even when you read through the New Testament, it is not too vividly described or requested of new believers or the New Testament church. They didn't ponder too much, or they didn't go too much. I mean, of all Paul's teachings, he didn't stress too much on tithing and all that. You would think that, it will come up. But he didn't do too much of those. And some pastors are of the view that, Paul didn't do that because it was already in the Old Testament. But there are some things in the Old Testament that re-echoed in the New Testament. So I want to find out, was Paul missing a point? Did he assume it was already in place, or he brought a new system of giving? Because he said, I think 1 Corinthians 9:6 there about that, whoever gives cheerfully, bountifully, also reap. If you sow sparingly, you get sparingly. That quotation. So my straight betwixt where I fall in this gap is, wasn't Paul aware that a tithing had been explained in the Old Testament? But when you look at the New Testament, it wasn't something that he kind of hammered on too often, but he gave us a model of giving, because sometimes some of our people go back into time, Old Testament, and pull the tithing in a principle there. But there are some things that they say, okay, these are reserved for the Old Testament. We don't have to do it. But some of the things in the Old Testament, we can do them. And my thing is, if Paul wrote 2/3 of the Bible and he didn't hammer too much on this, I am thinking, did he assume that it's already there, we should follow it? Or he realized that we are in a new dispensation of grace or giving, so it should be a whole new setting? Please explain that to me.
I think Paul was aware that it was a whole new dispensation. Remember, the Old Testament was prescriptive and proscriptive.
Okay.
Yeah, there were the 10 Commandments, which were proscriptive. Thou shalt not, thou shalt not, thou shalt not. This was supplemented by a whole host of other laws that said, thou shalt, thou shalt, thou shalt. And this is where things like tithing and so on came in. Now, Jesus came along and he said, these 2 commandments that I give you are intended to replace and supplement the old commandments. If you do this, if you love thy God and you love thy neighbor as thyself, you will have fulfilled all of the law. But you'll be fulfilling it in spirit rather than in form, which was what got the Israelites of the Old Testament into so much trouble so much of the time, because they were trying to obey certain laws and they weren't doing it with a willing heart. So every so often they fell by the wayside and God had to punish them to correct their path and so on and so forth. Jesus came and said, look, you will be saved by my grace. And my grace only requires that you love me and you love your fellow man and live according to those 2 commandments. And that is all that you need to do. And he specifically gave the parable of the widow's mite, who paid a little farthing or whatever it was. That was all she had and could afford. And he contrasted her willing giving out of the love of her heart with the offering by this rich man who made a big show of ostentation, and me, I've got all this money, look at how much money I'm putting in and so on. And he was not doing it with his heart. He was doing it for effect and for the social benefit that he thought he was going to get. And he said there's more rejoicing in heaven for this poor widow than for this man who's just a hypocrite. So I'm sure Paul was very aware that you cannot go to God with an unwilling heart and expect that what you give to God with unwillingness and so on and so forth is going to advance your cause any at all. It won't. Yeah, and we know that because it has been said that you cannot fool God. You cannot fool God. You can't pretend to impress your fellow man and expect that God is going to be impressed. So the issue of giving, really boiled down to what is it that you can afford? What is it that you can give out of the goodness and the love of your heart, rather than because somebody tells you you should bring 1/10 of your salary, whether you've got bills this month, school fees to pay or not, you have to bring it. I don't think that works. I don't think that works for God.
Well, that's always been a debate.
These are some of the ways. God will not be mocked. And you can't take money from people under false pretenses. You mentioned this lady who's been coming to the news again, Nana
Yes.
Grada,
Yes.
who set up some church, persuaded a congregation that she had the power to double their money, so they should bring their money and she double it for them and drop the money. And then when people went to complain, she ran away. You understand? So then another pastor comes and says, you Ghanaians cry, you're too greedy. This is why you're being ripped off.
Being
Which
scammed.
also is true.
That's interesting.
So,
That's interesting. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, well, you were there, so at least you understand the situation on ground better. Because I mean, from what I saw on most of these social media, this lady comes with bundles of money, enticing people that, hey, come to service this all night, and I'm going to give you money if you want to trade or if you need money to pay your bills. Come in. And people, I mean, move from northern region, southern region, mid belt. I'm sure there's people from Kumasi, central region, all converged at her church, hoping they were going to get money. I mean, I think she made it categorically clear that she was going to bless anybody who comes, but inarguably, it looks as if she intended to bless the people in the church first. So those who didn't get some of this blessing were angry, and it's now become, a court case, which doesn't speak well about the church. I mean, it's kind of a little bit, because I understand she used to be a fetish priestess and converted to be an evangelist within a short time. And, so people are saying that whatever she did while she was an unbeliever, she was a fetish priest doing the sikagari, is the same thing she's now doing under the guise of, churchism or whatever it is. So it's like now people's eyes are being thrown with dust. And so now who do you blame? Do you blame her for enticing people, or you blame the congregants or the citizenry who looking for double money went to? So now that, well, I'm sure the case is now in court, so we can't discuss it too much. But let me ask this question: are Ghanaians gullible?
Oh, very much. I think it may be an African problem, not just a Ghanaian problem. But having said that, we have also heard of 419 and how people in the global north also get scammed out of money. So people are gullible all over the world, but we tend to be gullible for different things. You understand? If you go to North America and you try to scam people out of money in the name of Christ and stuff, you won't get very far. But talk about developing a love relationship, or talk about retrieving some money from an account somewhere in Nigeria that's locked up, but it needs a little bit of something to release it and stuff. Yeah, they'll fall for those things. But here, I don't know. Somebody made a point that if you take the top 100,000 richest people in the world, there's not one fetish priest among them. Not one fetish priest. So if these guys are poor, on what basis do people believe that they can make money for them, double their money, triple their money, and so on and so forth? Because if they could do that, why don't they make themselves rich? Why do they need to sell their services to other people, pretending to double their money and stuff? And in the case of this lady, I think she realized that, as a fetish priestess, maybe you get 10 customers a week.
Okay.
As a priest, you get 500 customers a week, or 1,000 customers a week. So the pickings are much more lucrative. The numbers are greater. It's just simple marketing. You understand? And unfortunately, because things are difficult in Ghana, a lot of people are desperate for
quick fixes,
money to make ends meet. Just about 10 days ago, one of our staff got robbed on her way home. Some people on a motorbike rode up behind her as she was walking home and grabbed her handbag with all her money and her cell phones and stuff, and they sped off. And just this evening, before I came on the show, another friend of mine who was out walking with her man got attacked by a couple of people on a motorbike. She ended up breaking her collarbone, and had to get medical treatment because she fell to the ground when they tried to snatch this bag that was tied around her waist. So people are getting desperate.
That's true.
And because job opportunities seem few, and because we have not set up an educational system to train people to be productive members of society, we end up with a lot of unemployed people who are trying to make ends meet somehow. And you go to a household and there's one person who is being expected to support 6 other people. And it's a tough call. And allied to that, you have a currency that is constantly depreciating. I think I mentioned that it's a radioactive currency. And over the last 5 years, for example, the value of the currency has dropped by something like 70% in 5 years. So if you're earning 1,000 CDs a month, now that 1,000 CDs is only worth 300 CDs. And you still have to pay your school fees and your rent and your water bill and your electricity and your transport. And all of these costs keep going up. How do you manage?
Wow. Well, Uncle Max, I think you've said it rightly. You said it. I mean, nobody could have said it better, because the church is actually supposed to be a light on the hill. And I think Jesus did say that we are the salt, we are the light of the world. If our saltiness doesn't give the salty anymore, then what are our use? They'll just throw us down and walk over us. We are supposed to be the light. And because of that, I think our faith and our hope and our beliefs often have been taken for granted. And so people look through and they seep through and they come to adulterate the system that should have been working for us. Because if we, like you said, if we all follow the 2 commandments, even the modernized commandment that Jesus gave us, loving the Lord with all your heart, soul, and mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. These 2 commandments, which kind of summarizes everything, should be able to keep us through the system without thinking about duping anybody. But if we have lost our saltiness and our lights are no longer radiating, we just put them under a bushel and it's not giving light, then we are of all men, like Bible say, miserable. And I think the church is supposed to go back to its first love and live accordingly, because the precepts that Christ gave us are still working. They still work. And we don't have to allow the charlatans to permeate and mess up the game, because they have realized that most people are gullible. And when you mention the name of Christ, the name of God, people will give up. If when you go to church and say, oh, we are doing this and I want 100 people to come and sow this. People, Africans, we have a very soft heart. People will come, oh, they mention the name of God, so let's do it. And so people have taken advantage of that system and it's become a duping. So this lady that said, okay, come and I'll give you money. People say, hey, Mother Christmas is here. This time not Father Christmas. Mother Christmas has arrived. Let's all go and dip in. And then somebody is taking advantage of, and then the name of our God is put into disrepute. So we have to be careful. The church is still marching on, and we are the light. We have to provide the solution. In actual fact, governments and world systems should even respect the church for what they are made up of. Because when you realize in the days of David, God was using 3 kinds of people: the prophet, the king, and then who was the third one? Is it the pastor or the priest? Those are the 3 people God was using, And David, as the king or the monarch, had authority in the country, and his right men were, the whole trial system was working. But these days, they keep saying, oh, separate the church from politics. And so what politics is doing, the church should not intervene, and vice versa. If the church intervenes and they'll say, okay, we're going to take away your tax exempt and all that, so church leaders are numb. They can't talk too much because, hey, we are asking you not to pay taxes, so keep quiet. Don't even come. Leave the government alone. But that's not the way God designed it. Politics has to work hand in hand with government system. And why is it that if a king or a president is being installed, we still use the Bible to swear in, which means we still have respect for some of these things. But when they get to some point, they say, oh, leave the church alone, separate the church from government. Uncle Mark, it's been a pleasure having you tonight. I'm really honored to have you again to share your knowledge. I don't know whether you have any closing remarks to give us before I ask you to go to bed. Since it's past your bedtime.
Yeah, I would like to mention the menace. I think we are all familiar with what's going on in our country. What we may not have considered is that when we poison our rivers, we also poison the land and we poison the sea. And what that means is that we are destroying the integrity and the wholesomeness of our food chain. So to come to a point where we are actually poisoning ourselves, not just the land, we are poisoning ourselves also through the groundwater that is now contaminated with mercury and lead and all kinds of heavy metals and so on.
Okay.
And already in mining areas, babies are being born with severe deformities.
Yes, yeah.
Many are being stillborn because the contamination in the food that the mother ate or the water that she drank was just too bad. This is the next generation we are killing and maiming even before they are born. Never mind the impact on our own health. So we really need to take this seriously. And if we have any leverage, if we have any influence to stop this thing or to raise our voices in protest, we should take it up very seriously. Let us remember that the natural environment is the first face of God. We cannot say we love God and spit in his face or piss on his land. We cannot do that. Two are not compatible.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much, Uncle Max. That is words of wisdom. I don't know. Were you going to add something before I interrupted? Sorry, I don't know whether you were saying so.
This is just the last thing I'd like to leave with our audience.
Thank you very much. Those are the words of wisdom from Uncle Max, even as he closes us. Thank you very much, listeners. Well, you've been listening to Era One Radio. This has been the Divine Connection. I've always been your host, Charles Boison, and Uncle Max Vardon has been my co-host and my guest at the same time. He wears two hats when he comes on the show, as a co-host and as a guest. So thank you very much. Pastor Kron is on a little break, so he couldn't join us, but I'm sure he might be back on Thursday. Well, go back to YouTube and Facebook and pull the clip that we discussed on tonight and listen to the discussion. We are being practical. We call it Divine Connection because this is where divinity meets humanity. We are being practical. I mean, when we read the Bible, we have to make it practical. Whatever is going on, we are not going to just say John 3:16, for God so loved the world, and just leave it there. We want to be practical. We are not living our lives in a sender or whatever it is. We are going to be vocal and make sure what is going on that pertains to Christianity. We are not going to keep quiet. If there are some charlatans coming into the system and duping people, we are going to say by virtue of education, by what we have learned from school, we're going to apply it. And we have learned people, Uncle Max, Pastor Kron, these people that come on to share their knowledge. And some of these knowledge, you won't get them from Bible school. So I don't take lightly what Uncle Max and Pastor Kron come to share with us. So please go back and listen to the clip. Unfortunately, I don't think Facebook was able to pick it up because of the glitch, but YouTube will still broadcast. So please listen. And if you have any questions or points, you can always join us. Era One is a 24/7 program. Tomorrow evening, our brother Kobe will come with the Yonson program. He brings us highlights and news reading from Ghana, Nigeria, all over Africa and the world. I mean, those of us here will have our CNN, but sometimes it's good to nourish yourself with the news from the continent. And of course, Thursday, I'll be back with Divine Connection, and Max will be back on Thursday. And Friday, we have the Country of Blessing. Brother Siem will come with his team. And Saturday, our brother Austus, Dr. Studio Manager himself, will come with his program, KTK. And on Sunday, we are hoping this Sunday, the Uncommon Kitty ladies will come. So Watch Era 1. We are 24/7. There's music being played 24/7. If you are depressed, if you are morose, if you're having a bad day, just tune in and listen. Of course, when Uncle Max comes in to give us his knowledge, I just open my mouth wide and listen to his wisdom. Uncle Max, thank you very much. Have a good evening, and I'll see you back here on Thursday. Bye-bye. All right, bye-bye.
Okay. Have a good day.
Chimafidi non kotu era one radio. Samupe jumpe dietia. Chimafidi non kotu era one radio. Oh, and pampuma. Asam pampuma. Era one, you ever
I didn't cry. Hey, I was sunny, that's what I